The era of girlfails and hikikomoris are slowly on the rise, and honestly, it makes sense. In a world that feels so desensitized, where you're going through the actions of life but not feeling it, retreating inwards seems like the only solution. However, as a shut-in, FLCL was the exact opposite. It is a flurry of emotions, a breath of fresh air of freedom animation and sensible perversion. The show, originally released in 2000, was the culmination of Studio Gainax's pent-up energy from working on the depressing masterpiece that was Evangelion. The studio still focused on the elements of what adolescent feels like, but gives it a fresh coat of paint with larger-than-life visuals and metaphors. What really makes FLCL really stick, though, is its cast of characters. I truly believe that you could watch FLCL at any time in your life, and always find a part of yourself within it. Whether you are in your adolescence and looking towards Naota, or a young adult looking towards Haruko. Its fluid character base allows the show to change as you get older. However, when looking at the cast, there is one character that stands out as just normal, a character who practically blends into the background of the anime itself. She is the character I latched onto, so let me introduce you to the biggest loser in anime, Mamimi Samajima. I feel like loser doesn't quite capture the desperate nature of Mamimi enough. The first time we see her, she is poorly imitating swinging a bat and lonely underneath a bridge. Even before saying a word, giving the idea of imitating a life she chooses not to participate in. She then cuddles up on Naota, someone much younger than her, nibbling on his ears and neck, leaving marks in her wake, and even extorts him for free drinks. It feels like a vague romance, but it's heavily one-sided. Her design is plain. The only thing pronounced is her slightly pouty lips. Compared to the others, nothing demands your attention. It is simply just an average and simple day where nothing ever happens. Holy shit, is that a cat lady driving a Vespa? Just like that, Mamimi is in the foreground for the rest of the episode. Her more muted colors and serene atmosphere she brings is immediately bashed in by the explosive music and character that is Haruko. The show cements Mamimi as this out-of-place variable by having her fade into the back of your mind. She isn't important to the current scene. She has one memorable joke that revolves around the others, and she ultimately feels like a background character for Naota. This directing choice is super unique because once Naota forgets about her, we do as well. The show's intro conditions you to have her slowly fade out, which makes the photo reveal even more impactful. Naota realizes no one is with Mamimi, alone, forgotten, and begging for scraps. When Naota finally gets to her, he states that even the scraps she has been given are dried and moldy. It's here that's revealed that Mamimi either has a struggling or non-existent home life. It would make sense for someone like this to cling onto any connection she can get. If you are starved of love, you'll lick it off of knives. And Mamimi is doing that just in this case of Naota. Naota, someone much younger, is now feeling bad because he left Mamimi alone, which is extremely problematic. Yet, there's almost pity for Mamimi because of her circumstances, even if her coping mechanisms are slightly taboo. Mamimi has this attachment towards Naota not just randomly, but through mutual connection. It's revealed here that Mamimi was dating Naota's older brother. Dating here is a very loose term that we'll get into later. Mamimi was highly dependent on Tasuku, who was Naota's brother, and once he moved, it left this hole for Mamimi that she replaced with Naota, a pseudo-Tasuku who she calls Takun, not as a direct replacement, but as a desperate attempt to regain the affection she once had. However, Mamimi was under the impression that her and Tasuku were still dating. Yet Naota had recently gotten a letter showing how his brother had a new girlfriend, and even the slightest appearance of information that would break Mamimi's delusion completely sends her spiraling into a mental break, or as she labels it, an overflow. After some cool robot stuff happens, Naota saves Mamimi and they return back to normal. Naota's still somewhat wrapped nicely around Mamimi's finger. This is one of my favorite introductions of all time. Mamimi creates this weird dichotomy of being pathetic enough to be off-putting, but also pitiable. She has no one, sad, and because of it imprints on a little boy, Groomer. Yet she has this veil of magical delusion over life. Cute, but isn't doing anything to change her life. Weird. Even written on her cigarettes is the phrase, never knows best, showing how little confidence she has in herself, making you both want to guide her, but also hope she's able to guide herself. This is the perfect basis for a loser, a pitiable failure that lingers in the back of your mind, a character even the show forgets. The next episode, Firestarter, completely takes the cake with the landing, however. Although Mamimi heavily feels like a side character because of her background-like nature, she is a main character, and this episode delves into why she is the way she is. The episode starts off with Mamimi playing a game called Firestarter. Yep, she's a girl that games. The game takes the player and has them commit arsons under the guise of a god named Kanti. At the same time, this mirrors other arsons happening around town. What a coincidence! Along the same lines, Mamimi has been stating that she has been seeing this god Kanti in fields, even saving a cat once, blurring the lines of fantasy and reality. However, this gets pushed into the sidelines once again for a while until Naota and his crew are walking along the riverside, and there he sees her, Mamimi, drenched, shoes floating down the river. She looks uncanny, like a husk of herself. Her eyes are weathered. Even her face shape seems to be more adolescent and less moe. Her design is very volatile. I think that's the point. Even when comparing her first appearance to her concept art, it's rounded down, simplified. It's less characteristic and more cute, childlike. It's my theory that her design changes depending on how vulnerable and true she is. The more she falls into magical grandeur, the cuter she becomes. The more she faces reality, the more she looks like a weathered teen, showing how much she utilizes how people perceive her to look like this pitiable thing that you want to take care of. I wouldn't call it manipulation, but perhaps subconscious camouflage to find connection. This scene also fully cements Mamimi as having no one, being completely bullied at school and being seen as an outcast of the town. And this makes Naota finally click all the pieces together as he follows her. Mamimi is the Firestarter. They slowly trek to the old school Mamimi went to, all burned down, and we get a very trippy montage, almost a lens of how she is seeing the world. Mamimi burned down her school after getting bullied, and tries to burn herself down with it, an act of suicide. However, Naota's brother comes in and saves her, becoming her literal savior. Ever since then, he has been this glowing god to her, becoming fully dependent on him. They say they are dating, but I would argue Tasuku sees her as something he has to take care of, a reliability, almost like a child he had to play along with until he finally left. It is a recurring theme that people enable Mamimi, but simultaneously look down upon her, no one wanting to be real with her, but allowing her to fall deeper and deeper. Tasuku did just that, allowing her to continue becoming more and more dependent on him, and then one day simply leave, leaving Mamimi broken. Yet, she represses these feelings and falls deeper into magical ideas as she tries to summon Kanti, her more childish design coming back almost instantaneously. And a new savior does come. Kanti flies down, but with it a monster emerges. She tries to imprint this saviorism coping mechanism onto Kanti, yet the one that saves Mamimi is Naota. They bike off, and Naota states that he will be Mamimi's protector forever, fulfilling the role that his brother left. I mean, it's the least he can do, right? The episode ends there, fulfilling this Ouroboros of self-destruction and enabling. This episode really shows how weirdly manipulative Mamimi is when it comes to her view on the world. She sees herself as the sacrificial lamb, but wants to be protected. She will give herself up fully and completely, she just needs a savior to come down and take her. She wants this savior because she cannot live by herself. The initiative is too scary. She needs someone to take care of her. That was Tasuku, and so she imprints the only love she knew onto everyone else as a means to an end. If you're only taught one type of love, that is the love you'll always search for. She also uses the saviorism mindset to push any blame she would have for her self-destructive methods away from her. She is lighting things on fire because she is an agent of Kanti. You can only have so much frustration towards the dog, yet more blame to the owner for improper training or a tighter leash. And so she constantly leaves this bad taste in your mouth of her constant self-pitying and self-doubting and constant reliance on others, but you can't help but want to help her and enable her because of all the shit she has gone through. And Naota does just that. He continues her cycle of self-destruction because it feels like the only thing he can do. Mamimi disappears for a while until episode 5, however. In this 2-episode absence, Mamimi has barely changed, while Naota has gained more independence, now more adult-like. Mamimi shows some jealousy, constantly asking Naota if he likes Haruko, with him constantly denying as he leads her around town. She states her annoyance with his newfound independence. Naota then tries to kiss Mamimi, and she looks at him with almost an annoyed face. It's a very weird turn of events that almost feels out of character for Mamimi. She's asking for a savior to come down and make all of her hard decisions for her, but gets annoyed at Naota for leading her around town and taking the initiative. Naota even feels this contradiction and gets frustrated, leading to another alien attack. However, in Mamimi's fear, she calls out for Takun, not Naota. It's not a heroic plea or cry, but frantic whimpers and murmurs underneath her breath. To Mamimi, Naota's independence was almost like an understudy trying to make the part more their own. Naota was supposed to be this moldable piece of clay that Mamimi could form into what she wanted. Yet she sees Naota and his newfound independence now tainting the image she had in her head, looking at Haruko for changing what she had so expertly been building up. She wants someone who will read her mind, take care of everything for her in the exact way she wants, without putting in effort herself, a truly pathetic existence. Naota realizes this and simply gets up and leaves, leaving Mamimi all alone once again because of her self-destruction. In the 6th episode, we get her conclusion. Mamimi is sulking around and eventually finds a little robot dog, a pet that she can control. As Mamimi is about to try and call Tasuku, the robot tries to grab the phone, and in a brief moment of contemplation, Mamimi lets it, and her only way to ever call him disappears. With Naota realizing that Mamimi will only love Tasuku last episode, this episode we get Mamimi's same understanding that no one will ever be Tasuku, and he's not coming back either. And with this realization, she takes her new pet that is wrapped around her finger on a series of revenge plots against the people that have wronged her, continuing with her destructive coping mechanism from Firestarter. Instead of dealing with problems, she would rather destroy them to the ground, but like the game she was playing, eventually fire burns everything and leaves nowhere to call home. She named this new robot Takun, a new piece to project her wishes onto as it slowly grows more and more. It's revealed in this sequence that Mamimi has a long-running list of everyone that has ever wronged her, ever, giving heavy school shooter vibes. This shows Mamimi's heavy reliance on what has been because of her uncertainty about the future. Every adult and anyone that has ever been close to her reminds her of how little potential she has. Along with the only adults in her life leaving her, why would she look towards the future? Yet, the cycle again repeats itself as the robot grows more and more, simply using Mamimi for food, and leaves once again. This is where it finally clicks to Mamimi, that the 4 people she has called Takun, including her cat, have all left her, and she is the only consistent variable. Mamimi to me is the culmination of what learned responses get you. If your life is nothing but repeated loss and tragedy, it is only understandable to try and cling onto anything that comes your way. However, Mamimi is a loser. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I got all foreign films in my top 4. But she believes because of her loser qualities that she doesn't deserve love. And so she manipulates her own personality in a way to not grow. She's been told she's childish for having magical outlooks. But there's nothing wrong with that. The way she uses them to complete her savior complex is. She's twisted and tainted what makes her unique, because of the connection she so desperately wishes she had again. In the process, all she has done is alienate herself more and more from society and blame others for it, never looking inwards until her problems are literally threatening to eat the town. However, Mamimi only realizes this 2 minutes before the entire show ends. Her design once changes again, looking more mature, more her, as she takes her camera and takes a picture of Naota. She leaves Mabase, finally calls Naota by his real name, and goes off to college. And that's all we get. However, that's the perfect conclusion. Mamimi finally takes ownership of her own life. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get saved as long as it doesn't drive you into redundancy and complacency as it did with Mamimi. You can call yourself Void Femcell Girlfail or Hikamori Fujushi Snuffbait as long as it doesn't stop you from looking towards the future and continue being you. Most people interpret Mamimi's character as what happens during adolescence when people refuse to give up. I would agree, but only partially. In my opinion, it's less about her being afraid of the future and more clinging on to the past. She simply cannot bear with the fact that she may never find the love that once made her feel like something, that wrapped her in a warm blanket when she felt like nothing. So, without that love, she feels like nothing, and thinks she has to warp herself to try and recreate what once was, instead of realizing that she is lovable at any time, anywhere, and by anybody. All you have to do is accept that just like you have different facets, love does as well. The future holds so much, and that's the beauty of it. If life was just repeated experiences, it wouldn't taste as delicious as it does. So go out there and swing that bat.
Hi, you should subscribe and follow my Twitter. Thank you.